The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Good morning. This is Patriot Flights Honors Veterans. I'm Frank DeSorbo. I'm the president of Patriot Flights, and we've been given the opportunity by the Colonie Library to have shows where we do things with veterans. Well, people may say, what is Patriot Flight? Patriot Flight is part of the National Honor Flight Network that takes veterans down to Washington, D.C. We took 2 flights this year, one on May 10th, one on September 20th. We are a non-for-profit 501c corporation. You can find us on the internet. We have a website, patriotflight.com. We also, our mailing address is P.O. Box 190 Del Mar 12054. We do encourage veterans and guardians to send in or email applications to go on the flights. We expect to have another flight in the spring of 2015. We are the premier honor flight network in this area. It was started back in 2007 by a person by the name of Bill Peak. Subsequently, here it is some 7 years later. We completed 2014 by taking 99 World War II veterans and Korean War veterans to the memorials. The majority of them, I want to say 88 maybe, no, 85 were World War II, about 15 were Korean War. Sooner than we think, we're going to wind up taking the Vietnam veterans. We are proud as what we do. And I'm very proud to be among some people here today. Before I continue, I want to also say, if you need to make a phone call, feel free to call 459-2857, extension 331. So when you do have access to us, we hope to continue for many, many years, especially when we're including the Vietnam vets. We do cover a 7-county area. I am really proud today and very honored to be among a couple people that took our flights, but more honored the fact that for what they've done for our country and what they represent. We have 2 veterans here who have been on our flights, one on May 10th, one on September 20th, both veterans of World War II, both veterans of fighting in France and getting their way to Germany. And as young boys, they saved the world. I'm really proud of them. I want to at least start by just introducing them, and then we will continue by talking. We have Bill Butz here, and Bill Butz was in the 3rd Armored Division. Happened to be with
6th Army.
What's that?
6th Army.
6th Army, I'm sorry. Well, what I've got here is his memoirs that has been put together by his family, and it is entitled World War II as I Saw It. It's quite a booklet. I just received it the other day. I'll be looking forward to reading it, but I'll be more interested in just hearing them today. Also, we have here Harold Williams. Harold Williams is a veteran of the 1st Army, the Big Red One. He was
First Division.
Red One. Big Red One. And he was part of the Normandy invasion. He was there on June 6, 1944. When I first met Harold about 4 years ago, he was so honored. Here is a book called Honor Untarnished by General Donald V. Bennett. And I think Harold will be talking about General Bennett later. This book is very inspiring to see what happened on June 6th and how this particular general led his troops through the war. I want to start by at least having a few words and tell us a little about yourself, and we'll start with Bill Butz. Thank you, Bill. Go ahead.
What do you want to know about?
Tell us what you did, when you went in service, what you were telling me, how you got over there, when you showed up, and when all the fighting was started, and we'll talk about some other things.
In April 1944, we loaded up in New York and the New Amsterdam, 14,500 men. And there was one deck was all wax, but we happened to be could fire a bigger gun, so they picked our outfit to give us a badge to wear to go anywhere in the ship. And we took care of the gun. It was a 3-inch gun. We fired at a smoke pot after a few days out. We never really hit it, but we come close, with the waves going up and down. And we landed in Scotland. From Scotland, we took a train to near Southampton, and that's where we were trained for the invasion part, but we never made the invasion, but they kept dry runs. We'd load the ship, get blacked up and everything, but the food wasn't that great, so we knew it was a false run. But the day to give us all the ice cream we could eat and loads of butter on the dishes, I said, this must be it, and that was it. But even though it was almost 2 weeks after the invasion, as far as I could see, ahead and behind was ships. And they say it was like that every day going in. When we got to Omaha Beach, there was a mess there, and I was looking over the LST with field glass, and the first thing I see was this LST upside down. But our number of our battalion was 777, and that was the number on that ship. Just happened to see it. They got hit, one of those, must have been bomb hit it. But anyway, we didn't get into the thick of it. We in the Third Army with General Patton, and when they told us, I couldn't believe it when they said we were going to be under General Patton. But our first taste of combat was the St. Lo breakthrough. That was a terrible, and this gentleman here told me I guess he was part of that too. That was an awful thing, St. Lo. As far as I know, about 1,200 was killed there. But from St. Lo, our next object was the bridgehead at, I'm trying to think of the name of this, it was a small town, a small bridge, but if we could grab that bridge.
Remagen Bridgehead?
No, it wasn't Remagen. Oh boy.
But
it's in the book too, I remember putting it in there. But anyway, we got there and it was just getting dark, not quite dark. And I looked up and I saw 3 Focke-Wulf German fighters circling, way up, you had to have field glasses, you could see the Iron Cross on them. And I called my captain on the radio, I said, did you see those planes? Yeah, they aren't hurting anything. I said, I know that, but I says, I'm afraid they're taking it all in. My half-track was right up to the bridge when we stopped. In front of us was cut across that road was a place to block the bridge so you couldn't go on it. And in the ditch, all along that ditch, there's these logs. They looked as smooth as that table. There's no bark on them. About that big around. They were going to put them in, drop them down in there, like pretty deep. It was about that wide. So I noticed behind me there was a Sherman tank right up tight. And they started about dark, a little after dark, it started bombing. There was a bridge to my right, a railroad bridge, and the one right in front of us, we were lined right up with, was for motor traffic. The other was railway. When they dropped the flare, the Germans, the flare drifted over And they were really pounding that railway bridge, and that was always me, but we were getting some off shots. And they blow that hedgerow in June, you know, it was pretty hot. You know that. And dusty. And that dust was flying all.
Now, where were you? You were past St. Lo at that point?
We were laying in the ditches to keep all the bombing. But it'd pick you up and drop you down. I find out the human body can take an awful lot. And anyway, with all them noise and dust, I'll never forget, God must give us extra senses, because I heard that hedgerow that I'm right next to the ditch. I heard a rustling of the hedgerow, bombs or no bomb. And I took the M1 and stood up, because they told us to keep our bayonets on because the Germans are crossing the river. Well, I pulled that up like that, and this guy busted through the hedgerow. He must have been 6 foot something. He was one of the Red Ball Express that gassed us up. They come up with 5-gallon cans of gas. And he had a carbine in his hand. He had it sticking right up in there, it looked like a little toy, you know. And he looked down at me, he says, "Don't shoot, I was an American soldier." And I never forgot it. Well, it wasn't funny right then, but
Yeah.
later on. But
That's something we'll talk about, is some of the
Yeah.
funny and human interest. How about you, Harold? Tell us, how your experiences started.
Well, I enlisted here in Albany, June 11th, 1942. I was working in the Watervliet Arsenal, and I decided I wanted to quit. And I was told flat out that you don't quit here. This is a job, war job. You're here till the end of the war. So I said, well, I'm going to join the service. So the guy said to me, well, that's the only way you're going to get out of here. So I did. But I got in trouble because I lied my age, and my mother had to sign for me. Anyway, I got the papers and went back to the arsenal, showed them to I guess he was a colonel at that time. I guess that's what you called him. And he said, okay. He says, you're on your way. So I was sent to Fort Dix, and then from Fort Dix down to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where we took armored infantry and armored artillery training. Everybody had to learn to drive every vehicle, from the Jeep to the truck to the tank to the half-track. I guess I found out later is, you might have to take over with them sometime. But anyway, we finished our training, and there's a fellow named Jackson. There's quite a story to that. We started out in Fort Dix together and then went down to Fort Knox, and then when they decided to send us out of there, we said goodbye, and they shipped me down to Camp Campbell, and down at Camp Campbell, I was walking out of the PX one day, and here comes Jackson. So we started to laugh about it because we've been split up a couple times. So anyway, to make it short, we shipped out of there and got overseas, landed in Oran, Africa. And as we went in, we saw some of the American infantry not floating in the water, and we didn't realize that these goons, that they call them, these crazy fighters that just love to fight, and they got a few of our boys, and that was the first taste of seeing, your friends killed. So from there, they sent us to a motor pool, and they sent me up to a place called Catherine Pass, and as everybody knows, you've heard that the Germans overran us there, and we were fortunate we had vehicles to get in and run, but the infantry didn't, and many of them were run over by Sherman tanks and that. And finally that ended, and we were in the Bay of Bizerti, they call it, North Africa, and we were training for the D-Day landings at Sicily, and we lost quite a few guys there in Sicily, and especially our paratroopers were shot down by our own Navy guns. It was at night, and they thought it was Germans. So the Sicilian War lasted about a month, and our captain got promoted to major by the end of Africa, and now he got up to lieutenant colonel, and the war was over in Sicily. So we thought we were going to Italy. But when we went down to get on the boat, this was a luxury liner. We know it was no assault craft. Shipped us to England, went up through Scotland, and we trained there for the D-Day landings for Omaha Beach. And we lost a lot of men during our training. The Germans sneaked in behind a trail of LSTs and knocked 2 of them off. 750 men drowned because they didn't have their life preservers on right. But of course, I guess God intended it for good, because it probably saved a lot of our lives as we went into France. They had them on underneath, and they didn't have them on right. And then the morning of June 5th, it was actually June 6th, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, we left our barracks. We'd been confined for a few days. Nobody could go in or out, and we didn't know anything about Omaha Beach yet. And they loaded us on the ship, and I always remember there was a young chaplain, and he tapped each one of us on the shoulder and say, "God bless you." I guess he was probably saying, maybe a lot of you won't come back, you know. I always remember that. And they loaded us on, and on D-Day they sent some down over the ropes. Some of them missed the boat, went down and never came up. I didn't have to do that. We were let out of the rear end of that LST, and we drove onto a Rhino, and a Rhino is as flat as the top of this table. And on that Rhino, we had everything they wanted on Omaha Beach. Was the 50 calibers on the half tracks, and the 30 calibers all on the Jeeps, and that's what they wanted on the beach. But we didn't get any of them on there. We started to go in, and they came out with a little boat, and it was the beach master, and he was using some pretty rough language at us, told us to get the hell back, that we were drawing fire on the infantry. So I believe in my heart that God spared our life at that time, because the slot we were going in on, that craft was hit direct and blew sky high. But we got in a little later, and as we approached the beach, we could see carnage unbelievable.
You both have something similar, because it sounded like you followed a trail. You both went to St. Lo. Did you?
Yeah.
You both went to St. Lo.
Yeah.
And then Nancy was the next spot.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Then we went down to Colmore Pocket, and that's when they pulled us back and sent us to the Bulge.
So you guys, you're basically following a similar trail. Yeah. You eventually both wind up at the Battle of the Bulge. Now, before I start asking, what's really kind of ironic is this was the 70th anniversary of the Normandy invasion, June 6, 1944. And what's coming up in a few more months is December 16th, 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. Tell us, because everybody's heard of the Battle of the Bulge and all the stuff that went on there, how tough it was. You thought you were going to be home by Christmas, and tell us, and it sounds like you got similar experiences, so tell us something about the Battle of the Bulge, the kinds of stuff you seen there.
We were in the Colmore Pocket, and they fought hard, the Germans, to keep the coal for their industry. And we lost quite a lot of men there. But it was so hot, I remember we took a knife and cut each side of our boots to let the heat out, which was okay. Little did I know that 2 weeks later there'd be packed snow going in there. Rushed us to the Bulge, drove night and day. Well, I was with the advanced unit of the 6th Armored, and we plugged a line in just southeast of Bastogne. Bastogne was circled at the time with the 101st Airborne. Anyway, they had us plug a line which they thought the Germans might break out and go around Bastogne. So we held there, until the rest of the 6 armors come in. Then we had orders just to dig in the hole. Well, I worried about, it was 0 weather and lots of snow. In fact, the fence posts, some were sticking out not too far out of the snow. And I got an idea, the time fire, you know, I've heard of that. Once the Germans were smart at it, they'd fire that time fire. They knew your yard is away from the guns. They'd have it go off right over. Well, then the hole, you're going to be down the deepest foxhole, and the time fire's going to get you. So we had to do something. And I said to this tank driver, "You think you can knock down the road them fence posts?" "Yeah." He said, "I'll do it." I said, "I got to have them to cover our foxhole." So he ran down that fence, but the big thing was the barbed wire. Boy, we had hands in tough looking shape trying to get that barbed wire. And we took that, you know what your belt shovel is, a little, took that as a battering ram and knocked them staples out to get them, and then put them fence posts across. Then we had a tough job digging frozen ground to lay on top of that. In the meantime, before we got the post, I said to the guy, there were 2 men to a hole to keep warm. I says, "You take the right side and I'll take the left. We'll go in under, go down the bottom, go in under, just enough to roll under there when it started." So, but the vibration was shaking the dirt down your neck. And
I got to ask, and you both were there, and I had heard during the Battle of Bulge of something called Screaming Mimis.
oh, that's
The 88.
You think they're coming right in.
88s.
You know what they are? They were big pieces. They fixed on shells, so they're all sizes of shrapnel. But a big piece would make a terrible noise flying through the air, and you don't want to get hit by one of them. But it always sounded like it was coming in the hole after you. It was hard to get you. And the 88, like he mentioned, that was the best gun in the war, I guess.
How about you, Harold? What kind of things did you experience in the Bulge?
Well, we were up around Monchow and Elsonbourne, Hurtgen
Yeah.
Forest,
Yep.
and one of the forward observer units was up with the 102nd Cavalry, I think it was, and we were back a ways from them, and little did we know that we were right in the wedge, and we never knew it. These guys were trapped, and we were in an area where they went right by us. Talk about God intervening. Yes, God spared our life, because a lot of those guys were taken prisoners or were killed. But there's something I want to go back to, Frank. This is very important for the younger generation to know. We were spearheading in the end of the war. It was almost over. And we were spearheading, and we were going through a village in Holland. And the column stopped. And alongside the road was a little cottage. And people were pushing the shades back, peering out the window. And I'll never forget this. This guy come out, and he walked up to our colonel, and he said, "Sir," he says, "are you Americans?" And Colonel Bennett says, "Yes, we are." He says, "Are you here to stay?" He says, "Yes, we are. The whole army's behind us." And he says, "Just a minute, I got somebody I want to bring out." So the guy went back in the cottage. When he came out, it was a man and his wife and his children. And there was one little girl in particular. I remember her. She was clinging to her mother's apron, and they were scared of us. We were soldiers. All they had ever seen and was Germans, and this was the first time that this little girl had seen the outside. The man turned to our colonel that first came out, and he says, "Sir," he says, "this man and his wife are Jews, and these are their children, and we've been keeping them here in the garret since 1940. This is 1944. And it's probably the first time, it was the first time the little girl had seen the outside. And of course, you know, if the Dutch people had been caught doing that, you know what would have happened to them. But the one thing I always remembered, I think it was probably one of the things that made you proud to be an American, was that we had given them their freedom. And the guys started digging in their pockets for chocolate bars and candy and whatever we had and giving it to them. And they were so grateful for it. So we moved on and we went up the road a ways. We could smell it as we came to it. It was one of them butcher shops that the Germans had. And as we went by, there was a pile of bones there, and the fences were knocked down. I guess some of the tanks or something had knocked them down. And they were walking around, the people, naked as a jaybird, and they were nothing but skin and bones. And they were walking into the village, and as we went into the village, this German, I think you would call him probably a mayor, came out, and he walked up to our colonel, and he says, "Herr Colonel, you stop those people from walking around, they're scaring my people." So Colonel Bennett grabbed his gun, and he put it right to the guy's head, but the guys grabbed his arm and said, no, we don't want to do that. But I always remember that. Can you imagine the people living that near and pretending they didn't know what was going on? Of course they did. The stench was unbearable. But I just wanted to share that with you. And that day, I think it was a day that I'll always remember, to think that here these people lived in fear of their lives for 4 years, and God spared them till we got there. So that's something I'll always remember. Never
Harold,
forget that.
I've known Harold some four years when I started D-Day Revisited. He's left me with many stories, things that I won't forget. I know one thing he told me about heroes. Who were the heroes?
Under the crosses. Well, in the FFI, the French forces, the interior, no doubt they saved a lot of our lives. They knew where everything was. But the sad part, a lot of them, the Germans, when they retreated after we got in on Omaha Beach and going inland, they retreated, they shot everybody in sight. That's what they did in all the villages they went through. They just shoot the people saying, "Goodbye, we'll see you later," that sort of thing. Yeah.
Amongst all of this, and I do have quite a few videos, I see a lot of books. I put together a video, and I've watched it maybe 100 times. But as touching and as sad as these stories are, look at a lot of photos, and there were times when you smiled, you laughed, you fooled around. My brother was in Vietnam. He was in the 9th Infantry Division. He was out in the jungle. And he tells me some comical stuff. Do you guys? Do you remember a few things that would?
Oh, yeah.
Do you? How about you, Bill?
Good, I'll tell you.
Let's try and keep it on the up and up, though.
There's one thing that scared me more in the war than when you lost the enemy. Me and I had a Jeep, and the Jeep driver, they said, "Well, you take this back road and see how far they retreated, what we got to expect to run into." And I tell you, I'd rather have them shooting at me, because then you know where they are. When you go along there and not a shot fired, it's scary. Well, anyway, I said, "Stop the Jeep here, I'm going to walk up the next hill." So when we stopped, I said, "Geez, you know, we're right, what's this big mound here?" And it was a camouflage warehouse. And when I got to walk around, there's a stack of rifles stacked together, German rifles. And my Jeep driver, he went in already and brought out a box, and he was ripping that open. It was full of cigarette lighters. And I kind of looked to see what he was doing. Then I looked over the corner here. First thing I see is a white flag come around the corner. Well, I had a .45 pistol. Here comes a German. So I went like that, but I did have my hand on the pistol. And I said to my driver, I said, "We got company, but don't look around. Keep doing what you're doing there." And here comes another one following him. Hand down up with there and waving his handkerchief. Geez, I said, I didn't want to think that I didn't know anything about this, you know, kind of bluffing. They kept coming. There were 7. So I said, we can't leave these guys here. I know that. So I said to the Jeep driver, tell you what, we had that thing on the front of the Jeep. You've seen the piano wires, you don't get deheaded.
Yeah.
We were losing men until we fixed the Jeeps up with that. So I hung onto that bar there, the wire cutter, and I made these guys walk in front of the Jeep. We got to walk about a mile to get to the headquarters. So we walked into the camp there. These guys walked in. Boy, they run out to meet us, and they said, boy, you must have had some battle. And my Jeep driver, he said, did we? He said, I didn't think these guys would ever give up. Well, I turned around so they didn't see me and laugh at it. It was kind of some fun thing come in on it. I told them later what was going on. They had us cold. They grouped there. The Germans grouped there. But I wanted to mention the Battle of Bulge again. I worried about trench foot. That's a disease that they claim was from not having showers. Well, we didn't get no shower for 6 or 8 weeks. Where are you going to get a shower in the Bulge? Well, anyway, I said, what can I do? I don't want to lose my feet. Have 2 men from my company were sent to England and had their feet amputated, trench foot.
Yeah.
And I thought they were pretty deep. We had 2 pairs of socks. I don't know how many this man had. One I didn't have no gloves, so I messed up one pair by cutting a hole from my trigger finger and used that for the mitten. I said, now, them socks are dirty. I got to figure out how am I going to wash them. 0 weather, 3 foot of snow, and I got an idea. I can't heat water or nothing. I'm going to sit down the hole, take my old dirty pair, and pack it full of snow. And then I squeeze it, and pounded it. Then I dumped the snow out, turned it inside out, and filled it again. And I kept working, and dumped it out. Now, in a few minutes, it'll be froze stiff. So what do? That's the only thing I can think of. I open my shirt, and I slide that wet sock in there. Whew. Can you imagine?
How about yourself, Harold?
Well, anyway, next day I had a dry, but it took 20 minutes to get nerve to put the other one on the other side, the other sock. So I had a pair, but it worked. And one by one, some of my men got the idea, and they did the same thing. But I never got the trench foot anyway, but I did get frozen feet.
How about you, Harold? I'm sure you had something that occurred. I'm sure you've got a book here about some people who wrote books about the French resistance, wrote about your people. I'm sure you had some times that you would remember that were on the brighter side of things.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, Frank, but the thing that the younger generation needs to hear is about the carnage on the beach that day. There's no words, there's no way that this stammering tongue can even begin to tell you what a shock it was when we hit that beach, because men from our Rhino jumped off and picked the guys up and put them on one side so we could let our ramp down. And when we did, we had to go as fast. There was only 4 slots on those cascades on Omaha Beach. There was 4 slots up and down, Utah, Omaha Beach, and we went in Red Fox, and there was a little ravine that we went up. We had to go like hell to get up over it, and at the top was a sign, I'll always remember, Colville-sur-Mer. And today that's where 9,700 of our heroes are buried, right there at Colville-sur-Mer. Always remember that. And I lost some friends there that day. It was like you lost friends. And this May, somebody called me and said that they would pay my way over to Omaha Beach for a week. Remember I told you about that, and it never, Chris Gibson, our congressman, and them, I guess it just dried up. But if there's one thing that I would want to go back for, and only, is I just like to the graves of the buddies I lost that day on Omaha Beach. I would want to have that job that the burial group had. What a job that must have been. Because we saw a truckload.
I felt sorry for the replacements more than anybody. I'd get replacements 6 or 8 at a time, whatever I needed. And in 10 minutes, some of them were gone.
Yeah.
It's too bad you didn't get the replacements when you had a 3-day rest or something. We had times said, look, here's what you gotta watch out for. They sent them right up at the combat, and you needed them and you had them. But they pushed each other, you'd see them. I lost 6 just like that with a shell, because I looked down the dirt road, I'm digging in, and here they come. I said, that's my replacements. Shiny helmets. Those, I didn't have a chance to talk to at all. But the ones that I did, the few I did, is throw that helmet away. Oh, I gotta have a helmet. Look at, help yourself. There's a lot of them around here. Get one beat up and banged up. Not a shiny thing like that. Yeah. And then another guy, he takes out some white tissue out of his pocket. Where'd you get that? I got it in England in a motel. You better get rid of that. And stuff you catch on. The guys would run backward instead of thinking like they're running away from the enemy. They weren't. Down in their mind, they saw a deeper ditch or a hole. You can't outrun a shell or a bullet, right? You're better hit right on the hard ground better than you are moving anywhere when a shell comes in.
A friend of mine who I'm with all the time, and he reminds me of the foxholes.
Yeah.
And he says, there's no atheist in the foxhole.
No.
And he says, nobody's learned to stop a bullet, as you just said. I will say, though, as Harold says, is we have to bring the attention to the young groups.
Yep.
We have to remind, I call myself one of the reminders. Both of you gentlemen were on our flights that went to Washington, D.C. You know, as much as we honor you, we respect you, we really recognize you. It's also an attempt to keep the memories alive and tell the stories and let the people know, you know, what you went through. You people have led an interesting life, lived through a depression, lived through a decade of a war, then a Cold War, and then Vietnam comes along, and maybe your children fought in that war. Let me ask you, and I'll go with Harold first, because Harold was on our May 10th flight. What was that experience like for you to come down to Washington, D.C. on a bus and a plane first, and then a bus ride into the memorials and whatnot?
Yeah. Well, I was impressed how quick they got us through the lines there to get on the plane. But when we got down there, when we came to that Normandy one, that brought back a lot of memories. Yeah.
You were with one of the people that you were on the flight with. Was somebody was Ralph Avery,
Ralph
who
Avery.
used to live right next door to?
Yeah, well, he lived not far from me.
Right.
He was in the Navy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing more, I'd just like to remind people. There's a sight that no one will ever forget. And that's the time we dropped the ramp and we saw the red waters at Omaha Beach. Now, dear friends, that's no exaggeration. The edge of that water, some of those that laid there were not dead yet. They were still bleeding. And I don't think they could ever forget that. I don't even know why I want to even remember it. But that's something that the younger generation needs to know, that the blood of young men that day we gave a little, but they gave all. We had a homecoming. They didn't.
No.
We're sitting here today and reaping what good there was out of war. Nobody wins and everybody loses.
You guys, I have to say, the World War II people, you went out and fought the good fight for the right reasons. It was called a World War. And I really say that what you did was so remarkable, and that the fact that you're sitting here today and helping us, because you guys got something that I call character. And that may be something that you got to help us with, teach us, talk to other people, because you've got something inside that should be passed along, and we should never forget you. Bill, you were on a flight just last week, September 20th.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Everything went so smooth that I could understand there was a lot of planning there and schedules and everything.
Yeah.
And I think the place that got me the most was the wall with I'm thinking maybe 100 feet long and 10 feet high, gold stars.
400 stars. Yeah.
800,000.
800? Yeah.
800,000, yeah.
400,000 dead.
Yeah.
That's what they represented.
Yeah.
We had to find out how many for each star, because they couldn't put that many stars.
Right.
But boy, I just saw how many of my buddies is here representing the stars, some of these stars.
As you sit here today, you're in the 90s club. That happened to come from Harold. Harold one time told me about the 90s club when he entered it. I've gone to different things with Harold. We go to breakfast maybe 3-4 times a year. We've gone to different occasions. I hope to continue. I meet with him and his 2 other buddies that he lived with down around Chatham. And you both we're in the Battle of Bulge, and hopefully you'll come to the 7th. They have a luncheon in December, I believe on December 16th, when the Battle of Bulge. And you said, Bill, you're a member of the Battle of Bulge Association.
Right.
So we're definitely going to make the luncheon. And I want to say to you that through it all, as I listened to what do we got, 35, 40 minutes here, you guys do exemplify the character. And I do got to say, I haven't heard either one of you talk about any medals you had or Purple Hearts. Were you wounded, Bill? You were wounded.
Twice.
Twice?
A leg and a hip. I got shrapnel on the hip.
I think Harold
but
is...
I don't get none. I get 20% from my frozen feet.
Frozen.
There's no, in the toes part, the machine went right down to nothing. And when he moved it back towards the heel, it come right up normal.
How about you, Harold? Were you wounded at all? Or?
No, I went all the way from Africa to the end of the war. I only broke a finger, but that's nothing. That's nothing.
I always say that Harold I've known for years, and Harold lives with the angels. I really believe that, too.
I want to tell you, the first time I got wounded, it was November 21st. Now, I got a daughter that was born November 10th, but they always blame Patton because we didn't get our mail, because we don't slow down enough to get mail. But anyway, the day I got wounded, I was digging in, waiting for the men to move up, my replacements. And when I was digging in, a mortar hit the tree near me. I didn't know right at the time, but it come through a big limb. A hole come right straight through them. And that piece of little I know was going to get me. But it went through my wallet. I was kneeling over digging. And it knocked me down, but I didn't feel nothing. Geez, I went to get up to dig again. Down I went again. I said, what's the matter here? And I had tank pants on over the ODs. It was in the fall. And I reached through and I felt the rip in the pants. And I reached through and I felt the wallet messed up. But I went under the wallet and I come out and my hand was all blood. I said, gee, that must be it. So then I looked in the ditch and here come 2 medics. They says, you hit? I said, I think so. So I said, well, lay there in their stomach. And I feel them cutting the pants. And one medic said to the other one, I can see it. So the next thing I felt was like somebody pulling a tooth or something, you know. Then it started to hurt. And he said, I got a souvenir for you. I got it home yet. It's a nose part of a German border with a swastika on it. He said, you got a souvenir, but I got it home yet. They pulled it out, but there must have been a piece.
Well, I'm glad Harold's laughing, because I'm laughing too.
A piece must have got left in there, see.
Yeah.
Because I found that out years later. They didn't get it all. I got something. But anyway, one fellow reached, after they patched me up, they reached in here and pulled out my dog tag. What are you doing? Oh, he said, we got to notify your family. Hey, you don't do that. He said, why? He said, my wife's due to have a baby. I didn't know the baby's already born. But, because I didn't know till December 6th, and she was born November 10th. That's how bad the mail was. And I finally got the mail out of a stone with that letter.
So if they were to notify your wife or your parents,
They wound up,
they would.
he said, well, you need a Purple Heart. I said, okay. I shouldn't have said okay. So when I got shot with a machine gun through that leg, the guy reached in and said, oh, you know, not this time. Well, you get another Purple Heart. I don't need it. I got one. I don't need another Purple Heart.
I was wondering, because you got shot in the rear, maybe you didn't want them.
No, I was digging a hole. I had just enough to get my face into it. And by the way, if you ever place and say, how long before I'm a veteran?
Yeah.
I said, well, if I'm talking to you tomorrow, this time you're a veteran.
Well, I'll tell you how I got initiated when they sent Jackson and I up to Catherine Pass and Sedjanine Valley. They were a place they called their Messerschmitt Lane, they called it. And they dropped us off. We didn't know where we was going. We didn't know who to go to. And we turned to the Jeep driver that had taken us from the pool for replacements and dropped us off. We said to him, who do we see here? Well, he looks at me and he says, just go over to one of the guys. And he drove off. As he drove off, we heard this, and we looked up and we saw this plane coming. It was a Messerschmitt, and he was strafing. Well, the big guy stood by the half-track, and he says, come on, kid, come on with me. Because I didn't have a foxhole, and I got in with him. Well, I won't tell you what happened to me in the foxhole, but boy, I'll tell you, I was one scared kid, because I didn't have a hole dug yet. They just dropped us off. Nobody'd tell us where to go or anything. And old Jackson, he ran, and I remember he went under the half-track. But I always remember that. It's not funny, but boy, I'll tell you, that was how I got inducted into what it means to be scared. I don't have to tell you about that.
You notice when they said it's too hard to dig here, all you need is hoping a couple 88s come in. That took care of it.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Would fly and
Well, I'll tell you what he said to me. You know, kid, he says, you better dig your hole, because you're not getting in mine, because I'm not going to tell you what happened in that foxhole, but boy, I was a scared kid. And then the whistle blew, and the old top kick came out and says, we're moving out. Well, when we moved out, everybody, you read about it, how the Panzer unit, the German Panzers, they were crack soldiers, and they came in and they just swamped the infantry. We had vehicles. We just ran for our lives with the vehicles. You know, I'll always remember that. That's how I got inducted into combat.
You know, World War II comes around, and there's some great leaders, Roosevelt, Churchill, Truman. I've talked to different Navy guys. You guys are Army guys, Marines and whatnot. You all tell basically, I have to say, you're really proud individuals, have a lot of character. You deserve an awful lot of respect. And we do what we do at Patriot Flight to keep things moving, let people recognize what you've done. And I appreciate you being here. I hope many other people watch this. We are on 2 cables. We're on Time Warner, and we're on Verizon. And I really look forward to other occasions. And definitely I'm going to look forward to us going to lunch on December 16th. I know some people at your age do the computers, so you can go on patriotflight.com, find out about us, find out the kinds of things we're doing. We look forward to the spring, I also look forward to doing different things because even though we're Patriot Flight, we take you down to Washington, D.C. twice a year, we do other things. We had a reunion dinner, which were the veterans that went on our May 10th flight. We brought them back and we had a dinner. It was attended by about 35 or 30 to 35 of the 50 veterans. So we do different things as the year goes on. We look forward to it. We will be in touch with you, and I'd like to see that piece of shrapnel there, Bill.
Yeah, I'll have to remember to bring it. I got it somewhere else to dig it out.
At this point, truly appreciate you coming today. I know it's the camaraderie amongst yourselves is really what I really like watching. And as Harold would say, we get together for breakfast with his buddy Bill and Ralph, and I can sit back many times and just let them go on. And it's kind of nice to get them out and to do stuff. Hopefully we'll have a short winter, okay? For PatriotFlight.com and for basically Patriot Flight Honors Veterans, here is a sample of two of the great veterans, and I truly want to say recognizable heroes. Thank you so much.
My country's been good to me. I'm grateful to my country. Some of the other countries, the soldiers weren't treated as good as. There's been some rough spots, but overall our country's been good to us. And I'm thankful to be back.
Thank you, Harold.
He probably heard the same thing as I did. From England to Omaha Beach, across the channel, you could hear the men talking. And I don't know how many said, I don't know if I can kill anybody. But you know something? After the first day in combat, I never heard that again.
Yeah. Self-preservation.
I took care of that. That was a worry for nothing.
Yeah.
Harold
Because what are you going to do? The guy's shooting at you.
Harold said something to me just last Saturday.
That's it.
War is about survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.